Hi, welcome to the Blessed Stitch YouTube channel. I'm Ellie and this is our first video today. Today we are going to make a very simple bag pattern. It's a two-tone snack bag with waterproof lining, and I want to give a shout out to Jess Oklaroots for allowing me to use her pattern. This is a free pattern and all the sizes, everything's included. We're going to show you all the materials you need to make the bag and then step by step on how to get it complete. Thank you so much. Let's get started. So the materials we need today, for the exterior bottom, I'm using just some marine vinyl. For the top exterior is quilt cotton. That needs to be interfaced. I'm using SF Shapeflex FS101. You can use any woven interfacing to support that. I'm also, for my bag today, I'm using a pull waterproof fabric. For the thread, for my bobbin thread, I'm just using Gutermann fabric I picked up at Joann's. You can get it at most craft or sewing stores. The top thread is a Tex 35 from Wizardry Stitchery. Rulers for cutting out your pieces. A zipper foot for your machine. That's important because you want to get close to the zippers. If you choose to put a clip on it, then I have a clip here. We're going to do that today, but that's something you don't have to do if you don't want to. A bag tag if you have one, to add to your product. And then a stylus is always important to help hold that fabric. Marking tools if needed. Your zipper. A hump jumper if I need it to help over those thicker areas. A pair of scissors, and as always, sewing clips to hold everything together while you're sewing. So for cuts of fabric today, the exterior bottom pieces, you're going to need 2 of those, and they're 8.5 inches long by 3.25 inches wide. For the top exterior, I have quilt cotton that I've already interfaced with the SF101, and that is also 8.5 inches long by 3.25 inches wide. For the lining cuts, you need 2 pieces of lining, and the measurements for those are 8.5 inches wide and 6 inches wide, 8.5 inches long and 6 inches wide, sorry. And then you'll also need 2 pieces that are approximately 3 inches long by 2 inches wide, one of which I did put a little bit of SF101 to interface it. That's for the tab that's going to hold that key ring on, so you just want a little bit of an extra body so that it has more durability to it. So the first step is to assemble the zipper. I am using a pre-made 9-inch zipper, but it needs to be cut down to 7.5 inches. As you can see, I cut the 2 ends off. This zipper is nylon, so it's fine to sew over, but you don't want any metal because that's not happy with your machine. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that down to 7.5, which is actually going to be right underneath that little metal piece. So now my zipper measures approximately 7.5 inches. You're going to take the zipper tab piece, that's the 2 by 3 inch piece that is not interfaced, and I typically just finger press. If you want to take this to the iron, you can, that's fine, but fold it in half, long sides together. Then you're going to open that up and you're going to fold the raw edges to that fold line on both sides like that, and then fold that in half to where it's kind of like a little hot dog bun. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take both ends of the zipper. Be careful not to let that zipper head come off, because that is not, it's not fun when that happens. Been there, done that. So you're kind of just squeezing those together and putting them in that little fold. You want to put the raw edge of the zipper all the way to the back of that fold, and then you're going to take the other end of the zipper and do the same thing, and then clip it down with a clip. And then we're going to go to the machine and we're going to sew 1/8 inch across that to secure that to the zipper. So now at the machine, we're just going to sew that 1/8 inch seam across both ends of the zipper, and you're going to use about a 3mm stitch length, and then just go. Always removing the clips as you go so that stays secure. And you want to keep that end of the zipper as close as you can together. I always back tag just a couple of stitches. All right, and there we have it. All right, so we just got our zippers finished, sewn together, and we're just going to take the scissors and kind of butt them up next to the edge of the zipper, and we're just going to snip straight across, and we're going to do that on all these sides to just trim all of that little zipper casing close to the edge of the zipper. And it just makes such a cute little zipper that just kind of pops. So there's our finished zipper, and we're going to set that aside and use that later and start building the exterior. So we'll take one of the bottom vinyls and one of the top exteriors. Now keep in mind, if you're using a directional fabric, you want to make sure that it goes right side up. You don't want to sew it together and find out that your people or your hearts or your animals are upside down. So I typically just kind of lay them up next to each other and make sure I like the way it works. In fact, I think I will switch that one over. And then you're just gonna fold it down on it, and you're gonna use your clips, and you're just gonna clip them, clip that edge together. So you've got the edge of the vinyl and the edge of the quilt cotton that's been interfaced even together. So you can kind of see when I open it up how it looks. And we're gonna do that with both of our exteriors because we can take them both to the sewing table and sew them at the same time. So we're just gonna once again clip that together, and we're good to go. All right, next step is the sewing table, and we're gonna sew a 1/4 inch seam across the clipped edge along the long side of the pieces that are clipped together. So now we're back at the machine, and we are going to sew that 1/4 inch seam, sewing the top and the bottom together. I have changed to my 1/4 inch foot. If you don't have that, you can use the seam guides. The little markings a lot of times on machines have a 1/4 inch marked. So whatever works for you, whatever you normally use, that's great. And we're just going to sew at a 3mm stitch length. We're going to back tack, so back it up a couple of stitches when you start, and then we're just going to sew straight across at that 1/4 inch, and we're going to do this for both pieces, and then we'll move on to the next step. When I sew more than one piece, I just chain it. A lot of people, if you're a quilter, you know what that is. Chain stitching is just, you don't take the needle up, you don't take the work out, you just kind of keep going. So I'm just going to do that and keep going, and then get the second one done. Just zip that through. And back tack. All right. So now we'll go back to the table and go on to the next step. All right, so we're back at the table, and we just finished sewing our seams. What we're gonna do is we're gonna open those up, and we're gonna press that. It's gonna feel awkward, and it's not gonna wanna do it. I do a lot of finger pressing. With the vinyl, you can't really iron it. If it were all quilt cotton, you could, but we're just gonna press that back. So from the front, you can kind of see how that looks. And we're gonna do that for both of them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the machine, and we're going to top stitch this at 1/8 of an inch away from that seam. So we're going to top stitch on the vinyl. Now you can do this either way. If you choose to do in the quilt cotton, you can do that, that's fine. I just like the look of it on the vinyl. But 1/8 of an inch on the vinyl, we're just going to sew a seam using a 3.5 inch or 3.5mm seam or stitch length, and we're just going to sew that on both sides. So we're back at the machine, And we're going to go ahead and sew that 1/8 inch seam allowance across the vinyl. It can be a little bit tricky to work with sometimes if you're not used to it. You just kind of have to keep that pressure down. But we're going to go ahead and just sew that. Always back tack a little bit. There we go. The vinyl can be sticky. If you have a Teflon foot, you can use that. Some people put tape on the bottom of their foot. I find that my machine does really well with this when it starts. Sometimes starting, it doesn't always like to start, but once it starts, it's usually okay. And then we're going to back tack a little bit here at this end. And then I'm going to go ahead and do what I did before and chain stitch it. So get the other one down there, add to it. Like I said, you got to work with it a little bit because it doesn't want to fold that way. It really does want to fold towards the cotton. That's just me. It's just so personal preference that I like it stitched the way that it is. So that's completely your call. If you feel like you don't want to mess with doing the fighting with the seam underneath it, then feel free and go ahead and stitch it on the cotton. Almost there. There we go. Just keep it, make sure you're feeling it or watching it as you go, making sure that it is still folded under the right way. You don't want to get done and have your stitch go on, or your seam underneath go all wonky. All right, so there we go. We have our top stitching done, and now we're done building the exterior so we can start adding the zipper to it. So we'll go back to the table to get that prepped. So now we have our exteriors both assembled, and if you have a bag tag or some sort of cute little marker that you want to put on it, now is a good time to do that. I have my bag tags, so I'm just going to measure center. I know it's 8.5, so 4 1/4 roughly is center, and I'm just going to put it just a little bit above. I tend to eyeball it just a little bit above the actual line between the vinyl and the cotton. And I do use a lot of times just a double-sided tape. It's not so great to sew over, so I kind of try and keep it out of the seam lines, but it just helps to keep it in place until I sew it. And I do put a couple of pieces on there to kind of, at different angles, to kind of keep it from moving. So just put that on and peel the backing off, which is always the biggest challenge. And then I'm just gonna put it down, like I said, kind of eyeball it and center that, center that to where I think it looks pretty good. That looks about good for me. Sometimes it's a little wonky, but we're all okay with a little wonky. Over a little bit. There we go. Okay, so when I go back to the machine, I'm gonna go ahead and sew that around with a 3mm stitch all the way around. But while we're here, we can always do extra steps at the machine. It kind of saves you back and forth. So this is the tab to put the key ring on with, and we're going to do the same thing with this that we did with the zipper tab. We're going to fold it in half and kind of finger press it, and then fold the raw edges into that seam and on both sides. And then we're gonna fold that in half, and then I'm gonna take that to the machine and I'm gonna do a scant 8-inch or just a really narrow stitch on both sides of that, just to keep it secure and to add a little bit of detail to it. So I'll just put a clip on that, and then we'll go back to the machine and sew those two things down and get ready for the next step after that. So we're just going to sew that bag tag on first step. So I just about 1/8 of an inch. It doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it's somewhat consistent. I'm just going to sew all the way around it, and then back stitch at the end so that it secures it on. I always go really slow with these just to make sure they're even. Although, you know, if it's a little wonky, we're all okay with that. It is the real world. All right, and then straight up to meet the first seam you did. And then I'm going to back stitch one and forward one and call it good. And then we're going to take, while we're here, we'll take our zipper tape and we're going to sew down both those sides at about 1/8 of an inch. Same seam allowance, or same stitch length. And just to make it easy, a lot of times I just rotate it at the bottom and then go back up the other side. It isn't going to be seen, you're not going to see the raw edges. It's just to make it a little bit easier to go quicker. So, all right. So we have that done now, and we are ready for the next step. So we're going to take our zipper that we marked the center on and match that center mark up with the center line on the exterior top. We're going to do right side up with the zipper and right side up with the exterior. When you do the zipper, if the zipper pull, when it's closed, you want the zipper pull to the left, and when it's open, to the zipper pull to the right. That's preference, but that's kind of the way that most bag makers do. If you really don't want to do that, do your own thing. It's okay. But then we're going to just clip this down to hold it in place. Just a couple of clips here. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our lining piece. With the pull, there's a right side and a wrong side. The wrong side, it feels kind of plasticky, and the right side is more fabric-y. So I'm just going to take that lining, I'm going to turn it wrong side up, right side down. So my right sides of my fabric are going to be together, and I'm going to also line that up, but this is going to line up with the edge of the exterior, not the zipper. So it's going to go all the way to the edge of the exterior, and then I'm just going to clip that to it as well. So there we have it. It's kind of our sandwich with our lining, the zipper, and the exterior. And then we also have our clip over here that we're just going to baste down, and then we're going to sew this across the top using a zipper foot at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance with a 3-millimeter stitch length. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and baste this tab down, just to keep it secure, so that as we're sewing our front and back together, we don't have to worry about it moving around. So I'm just using a basting stitch at like about 1/8 of an inch. You just want it under 1/4 of an inch, and I am going to go backwards over it as well, just to keep that really secure and down. And then that part is done. So now we're going to go back. I'm going to switch to my zipper foot. Beauty about all these new machines is it's just a clip on, clip off kind of thing. So clip on that zipper foot, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew my lining and my zipper and my exterior together with that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and a 3-millimeter stitch length. And this pole can be sticky as well as the vinyl, so you may have to use a Teflon foot, use the tape underneath the presser foot if you need to. Sometimes it's just a matter of actually just working with it. You'll get to know what your machine can and can't do and what it's capable of, and then you kind of can go from there. So we're going to sew all the way to the end, back stitch a little bit, and there we go. So that piece is done. While we're here at the sewing machine, we're going to go ahead and top stitch this. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull our lining and our zipper Okay, so make sure you put your bag together right. It is what it is. Everybody makes mistakes, and I just am being real. You can kind of see the stitching line. I put my zipper on upside down, so I will tell you the right way to put the zipper on. You want to take your zipper with the pull on the left and you want to flip it upside down to where you see the wrong side of the zipper, and then you're going to match the center notches. I can see mine here, and then clip that down. And then we're going to clip the lining on top. Once we get that clipped, we're going to sew at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance across the top with a zipper foot. You need to have that zipper foot so you can get close to the zipper. So there we go. If you're more comfortable or you're not comfortable with the zippers, you can base the zipper to the exterior first if you would like. But I don't think with such a small project, I think you'll be fine. So there we have our sandwich with our lining, which the sticky part of pull is the wrong side, so that part is out. The right side of the pull is facing the right side of the exterior, and the wrong side of the zipper is up. So that's our zipper sandwich right now. And we're gonna take it to the machine and sew 1/4 of an inch across the top. So we're back at the machine and we're going to sew that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Sometimes this pull can be sticky, so just bear with me. Oh, and lovely, there goes the machine, the needle. Give me just a second. I will rethread the needle. It happens, we all know. We start sewing and there goes the thread. So here we are, it happens to the best of us. I'm just blessed with a machine that threads itself. All right. So 1/4 inch seam allowance, here we go. Just kind of holding that thread down so that it, kind of giving it a little bit of a push. That pull, once it goes, it's fine. Now you might need to stop and move that zipper. So kind of reach around into your seam and then slide your zipper out of the way. Just allows you to get a little bit closer to that zipper when you sew. So there we go, and keep going. Actually, it's not out of the way enough. There we go. And then straighten it all out because we want to sew it straight, and then keep going. And then you want to back tack at the end. All right. So now, while we're at the machine, we can actually go ahead and do the second step. We're going to top stitch that around the zipper. I'm going to top stitch that down. So we're just going to take our bag and we're going to open it up to where the exterior's on one side and the lining's on the other, and we're just going to lay that zipper down. We're not going to sew through the zipper, through the lining, just the top fabric and the zipper. And we're going to sew it 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch seam allowance across that. Just make sure everything's straight in the machine. And we're going to use a 3.5 inch or 3.5 millimeter stitch length. Sometimes that pole doesn't like me. Okay. Sorry. This is reality. We can edit some of this out. Alright, so we're going to sew that down at 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch seam allowance with a 3.5 inch stitch length, and we're just going to go straight up next to that zipper, up, kind of keeping the foot straight up on that zipper. And we want to make sure that as we go that this seam allowance lays over towards the exterior. Basically securing that seam allowance down to give it some body and to finish it off. And then back tack. All right. And there we have it. So we have the zipper installed with half of our exterior. It's going to be a really pretty bag. Alright, so here's our exterior front that's all ready to go. Now we need to add the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our other exterior piece, we're going to put it right side up. We're going to take this whole piece with the zipper and we're gonna flip it over. And what we're gonna do is we are gonna line the edge of the zipper up and also the edges of the exterior. So over here, we want to line that up as well as we can. Remember, you have about a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So if it's not quite perfect, it's okay. It'll come out even eventually, so you're good. But we're just gonna line that up at the top here, from here to here. That's what we're looking at. We want the raw edge of the fabric for the other exterior, even with the edge of the zipper. And we're gonna go ahead and clip that into place. Maybe. Some of these clips are really stiff and some aren't, so bear with me. Okay, and now we're gonna take our lining fabric and we're gonna do, the wrong side is gonna be up, right side is gonna be down, and we are gonna match the corner to corner with the exterior. So you can see the exterior poking out on each end. So we wanna clip it once again to that, and we're gonna sandwich all three of those pieces together. So we have the exterior, the zipper, and the lining all put together. Edges are fairly even as they're gonna be. Actually, they look pretty good. Sometimes if it's convenient, you can put a clip in it. That kind of helps just hold it together. And then we're gonna take this back to the machine and we're gonna sew it at that 1/4 inch seam allowance across the top to secure the zipper, the lining, and the exterior together. So we're gonna make that, or sew that seam at 1/4 inch using a 3mm seam stitch length, and we're gonna just stitch those together. And like I said, this hole sometimes sticks the first couple of stitches with me in my machine, but in general it's actually really easy to work with. You can use anything for a lining. For waterproof, you can use like a waterproof or a water resistant canvas if you want. Sometimes they're a little bit more machine friendly. All right, so I'm down to where my zipper pull is, so I'm going to reach in here once again and kind of push that pull back out of the way so I don't have to sew around it. And then I will just continue sewing all the way to the end and back stitch at the end. Then when we're done, we're going to go ahead and do that flip again and top stitch. So we're getting there. The bag's getting really close to being done. You guys are hanging in with me. I appreciate that. All right, so there we have it. Look at that, isn't that pretty? So what we're gonna do once again is we're gonna move the exterior, and we're gonna keep the lining to the left and the exterior to the right. We're gonna just flip that up. The seam allowances is gonna go towards the exterior. We're gonna kind of just finger press that down and feel it. Gonna change our stitch length to a 3.5mm stitch length. And we're gonna sew it 1/8 of an inch alongside that zipper all the way down. Always back stitch at the beginning and end. Mine kind of automatically does the beginning, so. All right, cutting threads. Then we can kind of see what this is starting to look like. There we go. This is going to be what our bag is going to look like. It's getting there. All right, so we're going to go back to the table and we're going to get ready to sew the exterior and the lining together. So I'll see you back at the table. So this is what we have so far. We have the exterior and the linings all sewn onto our zipper. So now we're gonna assemble the bag and sew them together. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just pick up the exterior. If you do it this way, it's probably the easiest way, and sandwich them together and lay it down. So we're gonna be clipping the exterior to the exterior and the lining to the lining. We're gonna mark on the bottom about a 3 or 4 inch opening. I'm just gonna kind of wing it because that's the way that I am. You've got the grid here. So about a 4 inch in the center. That's gonna be where we turn the bag. So you do not wanna sew that. So we're gonna, when we sew it, we're gonna leave that part opened. So we're gonna just clip this all together, and we're gonna start at the bottom where we made those marks, and we're just lining up raw edges even. Go around the corner, put a few more clips in. You can put in as many clips as you want or as few as you want. Everybody's different with what they feel. If you can kind of see inside, you can see this little piece of, it's part of the zipper tab. We want that to go towards the lining. So when we put them together, it's gonna go that way in the lining, and we're gonna take our exterior pieces here and we're gonna match those. That's important so that when your bag is done, it looks even. So we're gonna clip it there so that we have it nice and secure. And we're gonna do the same here where the exterior and the interior, or the top and the bottom exterior meet. We're gonna line those up and match them and put a clip there. And if you wanna put one in between, you can. Sometimes I put them in and then I just end up taking them out and sewing them without them. So just keep going all the way around the bag. You're gonna clip all the edges together. You do wanna, side note, you do wanna make sure that your zipper at this point is at least halfway open. Mine is, so that's good. But don't forget, that's important. It's not impossible to fix if you forget it, but it's not fun. You have to actually get in there and kind of open it backwards. So just make sure that zipper's open at this point. And then we're gonna, on the other side, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna match those exterior top and bottom pieces. We're gonna take that little lining tab that's inside, and we're gonna push it towards the lining, sorry, the zipper tab. Push it towards the lining and stitch it down, or clip it down. And we're gonna go all the way around the edge back to where we have that mark at the bottom. We're just gonna clip it all together, get it all ready to sew. There we go. Now, one thing's important. When you have a bag, you don't want the lining the same size as the exterior because it can be baggy. It's just slightly smaller. So we're gonna sew this a little bit different. We're gonna start at the bottom on the lining side where we're gonna leave that opening. So we're gonna start right, we're gonna have an opening. We're gonna back tack it good because you don't wanna pull those stitches out when you're turning it. And we're gonna start at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We're gonna go over to the side, pivot, come all the way up. But as you're coming up to this, you're gonna narrow that seam allowance, probably about the last 1.5 to 2 inches. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we're gonna narrow that to a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I am gonna use the zipper foot for this because then I can get closer, because you can kind of see where the shadowing, where that tab is. You wanna get as close to that tab as you can you do not wanna sew over it because that'll affect your outcome of your bag. So we're gonna go 1/2 inch over and up 1/2 inch, about 2 inches. We're gonna narrow that seam allowance to 3/8 inch, and we're just gonna sew 3/8 inch all the way. We're gonna down the side, down the bottom to the other side to where we have the lining and the exterior meet, and we're gonna do 3/8 inch, and we're gonna go down about 1.5 to 2 inches and increase that back to 1/2 inch and over to where our line is to stop and back tack. All of the lining side is going to be a 1/2 inch. That way it fits nicely in the bag when it's done. So we can go over to the machine and do that now. All right, so we are ready for sewing our bag together. Just don't forget that we're going to start at that 1/2 inch seam allowance on the lining. I'm starting right where I marked that, and I'm going to back tack, do a couple of stitches to make sure that's good and stitched. And we're just going to go to the corner, and we're going to pivot with the needle up. Most people know that if you've been sewing a while, you know, but so not everybody does. And we're just going to keep sewing straight up See, I tend to use those clips and then move them before I need them. Now we're gonna go all the way in, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, or as close as you can get. If you can't quite get 3/8 inch, that's okay too, through that. And we're just gonna keep going now, down this side, over the center where those exterior pieces meet. We're gonna go down to the corner and pivot. We're gonna go straight across. And finish it up. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you haven't sewn on vinyl much, I'm gonna back, I went a little too far. If you haven't sewn on vinyl much, keep in mind that it can pull. So I recommend anytime you sew on vinyl that you do a second set of stitching. So I'll probably do that. We'll get this sewn together. I want to make sure my hardware's out of the way and that it's straight. So I'm kind of just fiddling around with that. But I always, when I do exterior or when I do vinyl, if it's going to be something like an exterior and there's not going to be top stitching on it, I always sew that extra seam allow, just like 1/8 of an inch inside where you sew the original seam. It just gives it a little body. Sometimes if you notice that you sew something in vinyl and then you get that pull stitch look, that's why. All right, so I'm increasing that seam allowance to 1/2 inch, back on the lining side, down to the corner. Anyway, sometimes when you get that pull look, it's because it needs that extra stability stitch inside. So keep that in mind. And then there's my mark, so I'm back tacking and we are good to go. So there we have it. We have it all sewn around. I've missed the tabs, so I have not sewn over the tabs on the side, and it's good and secure. Now I am gonna go ahead and just on the vinyl piece do about 1/8 of an inch second stitch. It really does make for a nicer fine finished bag because you don't get that pulled look. It's just a snack bag, so you know, if you don't want to do the extra work, it's okay. I just like to tend to finish things, whether it's a little project or a big project. I like to kind of do them all the same and be consistent. And you know, my grandkids like these little bags, and maybe this is one they like and they want it to be around a little longer, so adding that extra little bit of security is always good. And then back tack, and there we have it. All right, so now the next step is boxing the corners, so I will meet you back at the table and we will get the box cut out for the corners. So here's our exterior we just sewed together, and we've left our opening. We're gonna box the corners now. So for the boxing the corners, we're gonna use a 3/4 inch seam allowance, and we're gonna draw a box. That's boxing the corners. So line your ruler up at 1/4 inch on each of your stitching lines. Now you don't want to go from the edge of the fabric. You want to go from the stitching lines, and you're just going to make a mark like that, just like that. And then you're going to do all 4 corners, both the lining and the exterior. So we'll just do those really quick as quick can be. Like, I'm not really quick at anything, but that's okay. All right, there's two more. Now, because I did that extra set of stitching, I'm going for the inside stitch line, not the outside one. So the one on the interior. All right, so lining those up with the 1/4 inch mark. Just making my mark. One more. Boxing corners can be challenging and fun at the same time. Just have to kind of work with your material. All right, and I did use a air erase marker for that. You won't see it, so if you want to use something a little bit more permanent, that's fine too. Now we're going to just take our scissors and we're just going to cut that corner out on each of those. So be really careful not to overcut on the where they meet. You don't want to go crazy with that. You want it as close as it can. A little bit's fine because you got a 3/8 inch seam allowance, so you have some flex room. And we're just gonna cut all 4 of these out on the lines. These scissors are wonderful. Nothing beats a sharp pair of little scissors for the sewing room. I think these are actually Karen Buckley, but I don't think it matters as long as they're good and sharp. Okay, so we've got our corners cut out. What we're gonna do is we're gonna pull that, just take the sides of the exterior, so it was flat. We're gonna take the sides and we're just gonna pull it. And you can kind of see that edge we cut is even. We're just gonna take the seam allowances and fold them opposite directions. They kind of nest in there. See that nice straight line? That's what we want. Now, if it gets a little curvy, if it gets a little wonky, that's okay. They're box corners and it's a snack bag. It's all right. It's okay if it isn't perfect. It will be fine. I like to put an extra clip down at the bottom to kind of keep it, because that keeps it from moving around too much. But we're going to do that for all 4 of the corners. So once again, pull on the edges of the lining. We're going to check and see which way the lining lays down. You don't want them to go across to where they fold over. So you want it to fold the same direction as the other side. And you're going to bring those together just like that and put a clip in. And then, like I said, I like to put a clip down a little bit too. It just helps it hold it a little bit better while you're messing with it. Now the vinyl edge is a little bit trickier to work with, but it's still the same process. You're gonna open it, kind of stick your fingers in there if you can, kind of pull on the edges. There you go. And you're gonna do the same thing. You're just gonna nest them in, keeping the edges straight, and clip them together. I don't like those little clips quite so much, but that's okay. All right, so there's number 3, and then the last one we're gonna do, once again, same thing, keeping in mind we want that seam to go the same direction. So just fold that in, clip it with a couple extra on the side. There we go. All right, now we're gonna take this to the machine, and on all 4 of these corners across this flat part, we're gonna sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance on all 4 of them. And that will finish boxing the corners. So let's go to the machine. Okay, so here we are at the machine, and we have our corners all boxed. Kind of sometimes have to work with it a little bit, but we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna slide that under the foot. I did change back to my regular 1/4 inch foot just because that's what I prefer sewing with, as long as I don't have a zipper going on. So we're just gonna sew it at a 3mm stitch length, straight down, and I'm gonna go over it twice. I should have just back tacked at the front and then I wouldn't have to, but yeah, it'll be fine. I'm just gonna sew a little bit here at this end because I forgot to back tack. And we want this really secure because it's, you know, it's part of the inside lining. You don't want it coming loose. You don't want to lose something inside the lining because there's a little hole there. So there we go. And we're just going to repeat this process with all 4 of the corners, keeping a 3/8 inch seam allowance and back tacking at the front and the back. Kind of laying it flat. It's hard to keep it flat and straight. It's okay. Like I said, it's a snack bag. It's okay if it's a little bit wonky. Just go with it. You know, you have to enjoy what you're doing. And that's why I do what I do, is I enjoy this. And if I got to the point where everything had to be perfect and wonderful and straight, and you know, you got to enjoy it. Enjoy the process. You enjoy the process as well as the product. All right, so 2 more to go. Now we have the 2 vinyl ones. They like to move a little bit more, but like I said, if it gets a little rounded, it's okay. Just go for it. I'm gonna back tack and then sew it straight. All right, one more. Hey, we are just about done with this bag. We're gonna finish boxing this last corner, and then we get to turn the bag. I always get really excited at this point because it's like, what is it gonna look like? How's it gonna turn out? It's always part of the process that's so much fun, is when you're turning the bags, and you get to know what all your hard work has created. All right, so I'm just gonna cut strings, and then we can meet back at the table and we'll turn the bag. All right, so we have our bag. It's all boxed, the corners are boxed, everything's ready to go. And I am just gonna take and trim these seams here just a little bit, down to maybe 1/4 of an inch on all of the corners. Just make it a little bit more even. And you can see, you know, it got a little bit rounded, but it's okay. All right, so now we're gonna birth our bag. So the opening that you left, you're gonna put your hand inside that. This is why you have to leave a big enough opening to get your hand in. And I usually just push down on the center and kind of grab it with the hand inside. And then you can kind of pull it through. And it can be a challenge at times to get it worked through, but that's okay. All right, look at that. It's coming out easy. So we're just gonna poke out all those corners. You can use a turning tool if you have or want to. I caution you against using scissors or something like that. That's very sharp. You don't want to poke through your fabric. So, all right, so we got the bottom turned. Now up by our zipper, we're gonna open the zipper the rest of the way. So it's open, and then just gonna kind of push with our finger, push those casings out. Push the casing out. The other side. All right, now just to see how it works, we're gonna put the lining in. We still need to sew that together, but look at that. Isn't that so cute? Oh, it's so cute. I love the yellow, and I'm ready for summer. It just is a happy color. So, all right, so the last step we need to do is to go ahead and sew that lining together. So the easiest way to do this, it makes it super easy, is if you just take your fingers and you just put one finger in at each end where that opening is, and then just kind of push them together, then that creates a really nice seam. And we're just going to clip that so that we can go to the machine, and we're just going to sew 1/8 of an inch seam just across that bottom. Now you can use matching thread if you want, to where it looks, I don't usually, for snack bags, especially the ones that, you know, the grandkids get, I don't usually do that. So I'm just going to use the thread I have on the machine, and I'm just going to sew straight across at about 1/8 of an inch, maybe even a little bit less, and just close that opening. So we'll see you at the machine. All right, so back at the machine, we're going to sew that 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit of a narrower seam allowance, just to sew that bottom close. Always back tack so that it's secure, and then just sew that closed, and then our bag is finished. It's exciting. It's always nice when you get down to the lining, because you know it's almost done and the creation process is finished. Although I enjoy it, so I don't mind taking longer for a bag. All right, so there we have it. Cutting threads, get them out of the way, and then we can tuck that lining in, make it all nice and secure. So we have the lining in there, and there you have it. You can clip it to a purse, you can clip it to a bag, you can just throw it in your car, whatever works. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and watching the tutorial. This was a fun bag to make. There are other varieties you can do. You can do all vinyl, you can do different ideas. They're wonderful for the kids, for the car. Just, it's reusable, so you don't have to reach for that plastic bag in the drawer. You can just reuse them. Wash it out in the sink, let it air dry, throw it in the washing machine, not the dryer, let it air dry. They're wonderful. So once again, thank you. I also wanted to say again to Jess at Oklaroots, thank you so much for letting me use your tutorial. If you've liked this video and you've enjoyed watching it, please consider subscribing to the channel and like the video. I'm looking forward to more in the future, and thank you so much. Get out there and get something sewn. Thanks.